right, Chillcast MMA, and I'm joined by Austin Brody of MMAPanic. And right off the bat, Austin, it's Super Bowl weekend. We all know that's going down this Sunday. No UFC, but after this weekend, for all the UFC fans out there, we got a long stretch after this weekend of fight cards. So obviously that means we can talk about some of the fights that are coming up. Obviously we can dip our head into Bellator 1 PFL, see what's going on over there. There's some smaller topics. There's a little bit of business stuff going on. We got some more Screaming A. Smith news. So Austin, it feels like even though there's no UFC on the schedule, it's still been a busy week. So what are you looking forward to, I guess, on this weekend? I guess if you want to go into it, who you got for the Super Bowl? And also, has it been a crazy week, or am I just blowing it out of proportion?
Yeah, I think it's been a crazy week. There's been a lot of news stories, and maybe it's just because we don't have like a fight week and all that stuff going on. Like you said, that's because of the Super Bowl this week, which I am looking forward to. My prediction is the Chiefs. I don't know about how much or anything like that, but I think the Chiefs will get it done. It's just been so long since they've been in the Super Bowl that I think it's their time. They deserve it. So I think the Chiefs will win. But yeah, other than that, I'm just excited for the fights next week. Are going to be good. John Jones, Dominic Reyes, so that'll be cool. And then the stretch we're getting ready to have as far as like pay-per-views and title fights is going to be crazy. So we're in for some good title fights coming up.
Yeah, and I feel like it's about time, right? It feels like it's been a little bit of a lull, even though there has been, I guess, action if you look at the past 2 months as a whole, but it just feels like we go through like a little lull where we're like, dang, when are these guys fighting? When are these belts gonna start to make the rotations? But you're right about that. There are definitely a bevy of title fights to look forward to. So I guess we might as well start with that. You just laid it out perfectly. There's going to be a bunch of action in the upcoming weeks. So I guess which one or two fights would you like to highlight, if any at all? Which one really sticks out among the entire crop?
To me, it's the obvious answer to me is Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. There's just so many questions. It's such a great matchup that we've wanted to see, 5 times and we haven't got to see. So hopefully it sticks together. Crossing my fingers on that one. Hopefully that fight happens. That's one I'm most excited for. Close second though is the Israel Adesanya Yoel Romero fight. I think that's gonna be dope. That's another kind of weird clash of styles. It'll be interesting to see how that one looks in the octagon. So yeah, those two for me are the ones that stick out the most. But I'm sure there's some that are floating under the radar that I haven't got excited about yet that I will start to.
Yeah, and we all know that. I mean, I guess that's a little bit of a product of just, and it's weird we're saying this on quote unquote a week off, but there are a lot of cards in the UFC, and we know that. Not trying to rehash that argument, but I guess to that point, as some of these cards get a little bit closer, the limelight will get shared down to some of the fights on these undercards. But for me, I guess I'm with you. For me, my number one is Izzy and Yoel because yes, we know Yoel. He's action man. He's explosive. We all know everyone loves Yoel. But for me, the thing that I can't help thinking with this fight, and I don't know where it's coming from, Izzy has true potential to become a megastar, in my opinion, in the same way Jorge Masvidal did, in the same way Nate Diaz did the year before, the same way Conor McGregor had these sort of big fights. If Izzy can stop Yoel, oh man, he's off to the moon, in my opinion. So I guess I'll throw it back to you. Do you agree with my opinion on that? And I guess my second one would be Joanna versus Weili Zhang. I'm looking at. So before I guess I dive into that one a little bit more, do you agree with my assessment of Yoel and Izzy?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like you said, Israel Adesanya's had a Conor McGregor like rise as far as like how quick he's got things done in the UFC, and his star power is up there, and he's someone that's comfortable in the moment. So yeah, I mean, the knockout over Whitaker put him on another level, and if he's able to finish Yoel, who nobody's been able to like finish in that way, that would strap him to a rocket. So that would be really really cool. I agree with the Zhang versus Joanna fight. That's gonna be a great fight. Even before the controversy, but even with it, I mean, now it's going to be even more of a heated fight. And if you see videos of Wally Zhang training, it's just scary. So, yeah, that's another really good fight. Those are on the same card, aren't they? Yeah, I think so. I think Zhang versus Yuan is the co-main to Adesanya versus Romero. If so, I mean that's a great night of fights right there.
Yep, they're fighting UFC 248 March 7th.
Yeah, so I mean that's a right there. That's a dope card to look forward to. You got to think like you said, Masvidal's making moves. Whatever his next fight, I'm hearing. I seen some buzz online that people are starting to be rumors that that fight is going to go down on International Fight Week this year. So that I mean that's going to be exciting. We also got whatever Connor comes back with next. So yeah, things are going to really start heating up these next like 4 or 5 months. So it's going to be pretty fun.
Are we to make anything of the memes? Joanna posting the coronavirus memes. Are we to make anything of that? I will sort of, to me, I just completely glossed over it as a whole. Both her initial post, the quote unquote China Eyes post that she made it and deleted, and the subsequent responses from Weili Zhang and her camp, all of that I just sort of glossed over. To me personally, I'm not really reading too much into it, but it was a talking point, so I'm not gonna just ignore it and dismiss it like that. Are you making anything out of it, or is it just a little bit of banter, build the fight, is what it is?
Uh, I as far as like the coronavirus meme she did, where like she was in the hazmat suit. I mean, it's easy for me to say as someone that's in Oklahoma that's not Chinese that's going through this like pandemic they're going through or whatever. So I understand that, but I'll be honest, I laughed. I didn't find it overly offensive, but people online sure did, and that's what you have to watch out for these days. So the China Eyes one was a little more offensive in my opinion. Like that seemed a little over the top, and I can see why people are offended. I can see why people are offended by both, but I just I don't know. It didn't seem that crazy to me. We've seen Connor say way worse things. We've seen other people do way worse things and get no criticism. So I don't understand why she's getting so much. Besides that being said, the Asian eye thing she did while she was eating that Chinese food, that was kind of wild. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but it's going to build up the fight a lot. I'm curious to see if the UFC will ever mention it.
Yeah, I think ultimately when it's all said and done, it's not going to be that big a deal. Um, it just is what it is. It feels like she's sort of leaning into that heel role a little bit. I would like to think that she's a little bit savvy to what the people say. I do feel like she's just leaning into it a little bit. I don't know. I'm just this idea that Joanna's turning heel and all of that. I understand that she's made some comments to Claudia Gadelia in the past, so she's not a saint. But again, I guess I don't look to fighters to be saints. Um, and again, even that is up for debate. Is that a product of just watching too many fights and seeing too many guys? Even that is up for discussion. But just me, ultimately, I just didn't read too much into it. I don't know. But I guess moving forward a little bit, I guess one of the hot topics of the week and the Stephen A. Smith saga, man. It's like this guy is slowly but surely seeping his way into MMA. And I'm going to start with the one thing that has stuck with me, and I just want to get your reaction to it. So with Stephen A., yes, the screaming, the yelling, yes, we know he does all that, and we're going to get into all of that, or at least a little bit more. But one thing that I feel like, and I need help with this, so I genuinely am looking for an answer. When he responds and he makes his initial video, which is about 3 minutes, and he puts it on Twitter, he does the somber voice with the quiet outfit on in the well lit room, and he sounds all he sounds serious, and then that's in response to what Joe Rogan said about Stephen A's initial comments. Then he goes on Twitter afterwards and does a 3 tweet thread, basically just doubling down even more, which ultimately leads Conor McGregor to tweet out, basically apologize. The call was right. Um, and Nate Diaz has thrown his hat in the mix and made some comments as well. Luke Thomas, Dan Lebatard. We can expand on all that. But the one thing that I don't even know how to properly phrase this, but I'm going to try and actually get to the point right now. Is there's something about Stephen A. laying out his comments, even if they are outlandish, in a cool, calm, collected way, saying that it is what it is. It's not that overly complicated. He saw what he saw in 40 seconds. We didn't see that much. And then to listen to that and then immediately switch to Rogan's response to that which is him sounding flustered, and he's like, again, like, oh, the shoulder strike, and he's doing the whole like trying to break down the technique and all that, and then you watch it side by side with the fight, and and at least to me, and this is what I need help with, like up until this point, and again, we're going to continue, but I feel like Stephen A was right because Joe Rogan should not have responded. There is something about if a guy says, yo, I saw what I saw, and then you respond with, what do you mean? That wasn't just a shoulder strike. He was in his stance and he's trying to do that whole stick and breakdown. Am I just missing the boat here? Am I even making sense on just this one specific aspect of it?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think the whole thing is that Stephen A. Smith, even though it was a lot of hate, he's seen how much attention he could get out of the MMA community by riling him up, and then on top of that, he's seen how much attention he could get from riling up the Joe Rogan fan community. So that's why, like, if you even watched his interview he did with Ariel Helwani, this every question he just kept talking about Joe Rogan, Joe Rogan, Joe Rogan, constantly. So I mean, I think that's what he's after now. I wasn't as offended by his, like, I know we talked about it, and I disagree. Like, I think he keeps changing the narrative of to why the MMA fans were mad. He pretends like we're mad because he said that what he's seen from Conor doesn't make me think he can beat Khabib or something like that. But the people were mad because his comments he made about Cowboy Cerrone quitting and not showing up and not even trying and stuff like that. So whenever he chooses to just make up why people are mad at him and then defends that because he has an answer for it, but not why people are actually mad at him. But I don't know. I think that is this part of like what you're gonna have to deal with. Like what's his name was saying with the mainstream media. Like, look, man, they make bad takes about football players and basketball players, and they get mad at them and tweet about them and do all that stuff too. It's a part of those ESPN figureheads and Fox figureheads that make their money by selling controversy, and the more controversy, the better. So he's eating this up, and ESPN's eating it up, and so is Ariel Helwani.
Yeah, I guess we might as well get into that part of it too. It is interesting because I guess for me, I'm a little bit torn on if it's good or bad for the sport as a whole, which I guess is ultimately, and I'm not talking about Steven, I just mean, which you said, mainstream media getting into the sport, starting to cover the sport. Yes, there's bad takes. Yes, there's this and that. But one of the other side effects is you can get Kamaru Usman, Jorge Masvidal going down to Radio Row during Super Bowl week in the lead up, and they're getting more views than the Dak Prescott interview JJ Watt, Drew Brees. Yes, those guys are legends. I'm not making that comparison. But if we're just talking buzz and clicks and all that, I mean, these guys, at least the top tier guys, can stand in the same arena as some of the other names to a degree when it comes to certain things. Like Lil Kane, for instance, I somewhat will frequent his podcast, and it's like, what's he talking about in the middle of his? He's talking about how Jorge and Usman are about to knuckle down to, right in the middle of Radio Row. He's talking about that in the middle of Super Bowl week. And it's just like, so yeah, there's the positives and then there are negatives. So I guess to try and narrow it down and prospect you, what are we going to get out of this? Where does this ultimately lead? Does this lead to more fighters becoming quote unquote memes? Does this lead and feed into that to where this just brings unnecessary casual attention in? Or is there a case to be made that you guys constantly talk about wanting to get platform or promotion and more of this, more of that? Well, you finally got it.
Yeah, and it's true. The bigger the platform you want to have, the more you're going to have to give up to get that. So yeah, it's at a crossroads right now. What you get out of it, if the sport gets bigger and it's more in the mainstream, then the mainstream media is going to control the narrative, which will lead to more money fights, which we've seen in the last 5 years anyway, and less like purely about rankings or who actually deserves it, because it'll be dependent on the basis of someone like Skip Bayless or Stephen A. Smith, who's just say this guy's good, this guy's not, and then the rest of the country who don't follow MMA at a hardcore basis just watch it, hear what they hear from the show, then that's what they think, so they get to control the narrative. That's why I think it's important. I don't for ESPN, and I don't think I don't have a problem with Stephen A. Smith or any of them talking about MMA and giving their opinion. And I don't think fans should get that mad about what his opinion is. If he's not qualified, then you shouldn't even care about what his opinion is. But when they're doing these shows, I think they should have an MMA person that doesn't know what they're saying to have a counterbalance that is a real actual opinion that people can take something out of. The way they usually do, and I think they did do that with Joe Rogan. He was when it was him and Stephen A. But he did look like off put by some of the comments that Stephen A. was saying and stuff like that. But yeah, the bigger people want the sport, the more people are gonna get to control it. So that's something MMA fans have to think about. But it's not up to them anyway. It's up to the UFC, and the bigger's better than them.
Is Ariel Helwani getting too close to the fire? Is that a dumb question or is there legitimate concern?
Uh, no, I think he is. I think he's been that way. I think he's a. I like his show. I think he's a company man. Like he just ran and defended Stephen A. Right away, which is fine. Like if that's the so did Chael Sonnen. I don't take a problem with that either. But he's always on the company side. He seems like he's always putting the UFC over in good light and stuff like that. When you know he had very bad problems with them in the past. So I don't know. I think he's kind of a shill. If we're just being completely honest.
Respect, and I honestly think that there, and I do think we have talked about this in the past, but I just think media has different roles. Not everyone that has a media tag is, a journalist. And these guys, they have different roles. Like a guy that's just shooting photos for a promoter or whatever for a local fight team, he has to wear the exact same tag as a guy that might be doing a hit piece on a promoter. They all wear the exact same credentials. So I think it's a little bit of that. But this idea, and I guess to your point, I don't fully agree, but I do at least feel like, to your point, I feel like he should stop saying the whole "I went to Syracuse for journalism." That little line that he likes to roll out every now and again, I would like him to just dead that one. Just let it go. I don't want to hear it anymore. Not when you're at least to the public. You're starting to do stuff that's like, okay, all right, because that Stephen A. interview, that was an interesting one to listen to.
Yeah, and look, I like Iroquois. I'm not saying anything against him. I watch his show. He's like for the past decade, he's the one that's brought us the MMA content. So I'm not disrespecting that at all. I just with what you're saying, like he's promotes himself as a journalist. He's a part of the MMA journalist union thing that they have. I don't know what that is totally about, but he's part of that. And I don't totally trust his narrative. I don't trust that it's actually his opinion and not swayed by whoever he works for at the time. But for what he does, like an interview show, he gets is very entertaining. He's able to get a lot out of his guests and get a lot of like nobody's better at getting just a random interesting story out of a fighter than Ariel because once he gets one little detail, he'll like a ball of yarn. He'll just keep unraveling until you tell this story. So and no, probably not many people in the sport have made more stars than Ariel Helwani. Like I know Dana White and promoters have, but Ariel Helwani's put over a lot of people. So uh, I respect his spot. But when I'm looking for like actual opinions on the sport, if I'm being honest, I would rather go to a Luke Thomas or something like that. And I know that he's controversial in the fact that people love him or hate him too. And I don't always agree with him, but I believe that it's his opinion.
And I guess to that point, Luke Thomas was also in the conversation this past week as far as the Stephen A. Smith side of this goes. And Dan Le Batard, he's another ESPN talking head. He also made some comments this past week. And just for quote, I don't know if anyone saw this out there, but just I guess a little quote from Luke. He said, "I love Dan. I love his show." Referring to Dan Le Batard, he said, "I love Dan. I love his show. I legitimately think he's the best talent at ESPN. I appreciate the points here, and I won't belabor the point, but equating the moral dimensions and occupational hazards of cockfighting to MMA is impossible for me to sign off on." Basically, okay, so that I feel like that's just a small screenshot of his entire point as a whole. He's been pretty consistent, which is something again you said. Um, and Dan Le Batard, basically to try and encapsulate it for someone that hasn't heard it. And again, video of all this stuff and the tweets are all still up. So this is why we're sort of just like brushing through what the actual quotes are, not giving you word for word every little breakdown of things. But Dan Le Batard, he basically said that you guys want us to cover the sport, us being the mainstream, but every time you do, you get mad because we don't know as much as you guys know. He said it in sort of a tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic sort of way. So I guess I'll throw it back to you. Do you agree with Dan Le Batard, or do you think Luke was right? What do you think of sort of their angle to this? What did that sort of add to the conversation, or make you, I guess, realize about?
Yeah, and I didn't know about that this was even going on before we started recording. Like you showed me the Levchart uh, part. I don't know Luke's full take on it, so I can't judge that part. But I see what Levitard's saying in a sense. You know, like you want us to promote it, but you don't want us to. But what he needs to realize is, and I'm a part of the MMA like fan community. I'm a huge fan. I love the fans, but they do that to people that do know what they're talking about too. They don't just come after people that are mainstream media. They come after people that are hardcore media. They go after them too. It's a divisive thing. It's sports. People are either going to like your opinion or they're not going to, and they're going to get mad at you when you say something they don't like, and they're going to love you when they say something you do like. So I understand what he's saying, but the way the way it's like it's one way or the other. It's kind of that way too. It's like, well, you're a mainstream media guy. Shouldn't you be used to getting backlash while taking a side or covering something on a sport? So I mean, uh, I'm sure in Skip Bayless or Stephen A. Smith's time, there's been an NBA player or someone else that said that they were bad for the sport of basketball. Which, as a matter of fact, I think I've heard even arguments where they've said that, but for their journalism. So people have said this before. It's not. It just now they're just starting to talk about MMA, so they're getting the wrath of mad MMA fans, which come after mainstream hardcore. They come after everyone they don't agree with. That's sports. So I understand what he's saying, but that's just his job. That's part of his job. You have to take that sort of criticism.
From Stephen A. Smith's point of view, to sort of dovetail off of what you just said, I feel like, and again, I guess it's sort of just all, and again, for anyone listening to this, this is just one of those things where it was sort of a underlaying topic that I feel like it's one of those things where you just got to flush the convo out and just sort of get it all out there, and then you can move on. But again, I just feel like this is one of those situations where you got Stephen A. Smith and you got all these talking heads, you Skip Baylesses and all that. They understand what's going on. It's not a coincidence that Stephen A. only responded to Joe Rogan, and when he did, he specifically said, I at least caught part of it. He was like, if you ever want to talk sports or this and that, he's like, you can get a hold of me, aka bring me on the Joe Rogan podcast so we can get these views popping. And it's like he knows what he's doing. It was a slow sports day at the time as far as actual sport, as far as basketball games, football prep. We all know there's a week in between for the Super Bowl. So it's like Conor McGregor was still his name was still hot on everyone's tongue. He got brought up by a guy that has a couple million followers of his own. So, and again, we said this earlier, but I feel like from his perspective, this idea that he is the one doing this, trying to make it seem like he's so deeply emotionally involved. No, you aren't. No, you aren't. We were the hottest thing of the day in the same way that you'll do that with anything else. The same way you rip John Wall, even though you won't talk about him if he does anything positive. It's like literally the only time you bring up certain stuff is when it's bad. So I just feel like this was par for the courses as far as that's concerned. But I guess to sort of put a cap on this little part of the conversation, do you feel like this sort of speaks to, and I hate to sort of end it on this one, but like, does this speak to the ESPN UFC deal? Does this speak to, like, are we going to see more of this? Is it going to get worse? Is it just going to, like, the more we complain, is our anger just going to come across as more SEO traffic and clicks? Like, or is there somewhere where you think, oh, maybe they will try and give us a Max Kellerman? If you're gonna run someone out there, maybe you do try a Dan Le Batard, someone that at least has been talking to fighters for over a decade. Is there a point to be made with that, or what?
Yeah, and I think it is an ESPN thing. The UFC was at Fox for years. We never had this problem. They never brought Skip Bayless out to the fights or anything like that. They stuck with their core fight analysts and former fighters to do it. And with what you're saying, or with ESPN, I think if people want to not see Stephen A. cover the sport, they need to not watch when he covers the sport. That's the only way, because complaining about him is still watching him, and that's all they care about. They just want you to, to see that you're subscribed and that you're watching. So if you don't want to see Stephen A., don't watch any of his stuff and ignore him. Like, but as far as just being mad at him, going at him like that, that's as good. I watched an interview with him the other day where he said hating me or the people cheering me or booing me is equally important to me. Like I could care less about either one. So uh, he's a master. Like some of these media figures are literal, they're masters at keeping themselves in the media, and that's a real skill, and they're very good at it. So if you don't want to see him anymore, my opinion would be don't watch him, because I don't think complaining does anything, in especially in the climate of times we're in now, where so much stuff is getting complained about so much that it's hard to figure out which ones to care about and which ones not to. So I think if you don't want Stephen A. Smith, just don't watch it when he's on. Then maybe ESPN will be like, look, maybe we'll give Max Kellerman a try. Who is the, like, you brought this up, but he's the clear one, even on First Take, that should be the one who comes to talk about MMA. He's a boxing expert. That's an easy transition over. So yeah, I don't know though if every time Stephen A. Smith comes on a UFC fight, it gets this many clicks and this many tweets about it, then I think it'll keep happening for sure.
One person I guess I would like to actually highlight that I feel like is considered mainstream, but does a really good job in my opinion, or at least if I'm gonna sound like an MMA fan for a second, he's the best of the MMA stream crop. But I feel like Rich Eisen, he does beautiful MMA interviews for all the complaining and hand wringing about mainstream guys getting in MMA and sounding like complete idiots. Rich Eisen, he's someone, he does a lot of work for the NFL Network, and I'm not just saying this just to just plug his stuff. No, I feel like if you're looking for like, oh, what's that trendy hip thing that the MMA guys are doing as far as interviews are concerned. I don't feel like it's the Breakfast Club. I don't feel like it's Complex. I don't feel like it's any of these other conglomerates. I feel like Rich Eisen is the one that's, for instance, if you just watch his interview that he just did with Jorge Masvidal, there's a lot of, because as fans we talk about like there's a lot of comparing when these guys step into the mainstream, and if you listen to MMA fighters compared to NBA or NFL players, they really do say. I mean, it is true. MMA fighters say the most unique stuff. They're not going to say in an interview, I'm just highly motivated, this and that. They'll say other stuff. I mean, and I feel like to bring that out and to harness that, there are a lot of people that do it bad. But one of the people that I feel like does it well, and SVP Scott Van Pelt, he's another ESPN talking head. It's a shame that he comes on so late at night. But again, I feel like if you're an MMA fan and you are listening to this and we got you all fired up and upset and you want to, okay, switch your tune, go to Rich Eisen's YouTube channel. He's a quote unquote mainstream talking head that puts out some great MMA related content.
Just to piggyback off what you're saying, I completely agree with that, and I think what the difference is, because I enjoy Rich Eisen too when he interviews fighters, and I think it's because when you're a mainstream media guy, you're interviewing a fighter, I don't think you have to pretend to be an expert or pretend to like know everything about the sport. It's okay to be like, this is not my wheelhouse, and I'm just going to interview as like this interesting man or woman that decided to get into fighting, and they get stuff out of them as a human that we must that we might not get. Save some of the intricate fight questions and the strategies and all that stuff. Save that for MMA junkie and MMA fighting. These mainstream media what they can do is use because they all have great interviewing skills and great personal skills. Use that to draw things out of them as a person that as MMA fans might not know. And I think that's what Rich Eisen does. Kind of what you're saying. So that would be like a mainstream media thing to work on. Would be like, you don't have to act like you're an expert if you're not. It's okay. Like it's okay to just come at it with a blank slate and just find out stuff as you go. So yeah, I agree completely with what you're saying.
And I'm just going to toss it right back to you. Agree, disagree. This week has been fun. It's been interesting seeing these guys get a quote unquote mainstream rub. Yes, I know and we've just talked about it for the past half hour, the negativity, but just seeing like, oh snap, Stephen A's responding to Joe Rogan, McGregor responds to Stephen A. Stephen A. Like we're just seeing like, okay, This is sort of like the normal ebb and flow that we see with other sports. MMA got to taste it for a week. Yeah, it's a little bit sour, but the buzz kind of felt a little good. You agree, disagree?
Yeah, look, man, I enjoy like watching First Take and hearing them talk about UFC, even if like some of the takes that they have on it annoy me, but like that's how it is. Like they all have different perspectives on everything, and the fact that we're getting talked about, like for as much as I disagree with the statement, the fact that the sport is getting talked about by Stephen A. Smith does hold some legitimacy to it for sure. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
All right, and again, you're listening to Chillcast MMA, and I'm joined by Austin of MMAPanic. Sorry, I guess just to switch gears a little bit, because that was one of those things I said I just felt like we couldn't not talk about it just because it was flying everywhere from so many angles. But one other thing that I guess I did sort of want to touch on, and this one I guess will be a little bit brief because admittedly I am not an expert, but John S. Nash, a Bloody Elbow, he's someone that does a lot of the business stuff. If you've been around MMA and checked sort of the blogs, chances are if you're listening to this, you're at least aware of who I'm referring to. But he put out a chart that basically, from the UFC's perspective, answers the question, what makes them, the UFC, so different from other sports leagues and so valuable? Well, one little slide, it's not a lot, and I know I sent it over to you just before this, so not a lot of time to react, but it is interesting. And again, I'm not an expert. And again, like I don't know as much about this as John Nash, someone that put it out there, and it's one screenshot out of what I'm going to assume was the entire project or presentation. But just I guess when you sort of see it, and I'll put a link to it below, or if anyone wants to see, again, you can hit me up on Twitter at Nixon_speech. It's there, or John S. Nash, just go straight to the source. But when you see that image, anything pop out at all?
Just the first thought in my head was like, it made more sense that it's UFC sold for what it's sold for, because like, yeah, just that they owned all the rights, they were they were worldwide, all that kind of stuff. It seems like it should be the most profitable sports, but it's definitely not for the athletes involved. Maybe just for the owners, but yeah, that was an interesting chart.
It's just interesting for me. And again, there are a lot of takeaways, and I would love to hear someone else sort of go more in depth on it. But for me, it's just one of those things where I look at it and I'm like, this narrative that I feel like the UFC painted for a long while, where they were just this mom and pop shop on the up and up, and they were trying so hard, and the sponsors were saying no and this and that. I don't know. It's just one of those things where I look at the image and I'm like, boy, do I question that when you and it just again makes me go back to when McGregor said I forget which fight it was leading up to, but he said something like he's the reason why they were able to sell for as much as they did to WME IMG. And Dana just he sort of had like a sort of look. Now I'm starting to think that that little sneer that he made at the time, it wasn't just him writing it off. I think it's because he knows he's got stuff like this just lying around his office that he can roll out to these meetings and start to get some movement going. It is interesting, and it does say something to the fact that WME IMG, they've been tight-lipped about a lot. We still have yet to hear Ari, and it's like we have yet to hear from them on that stage so much that I can hardly remember the freaking owner's name. Um, so it's interesting that a document like this would get leaked at all. I don't know what that. You could read into that what you will, but I guess for me, that's sort of the one thing I'm like, this idea that they were some small mom and pop shop. No, because the UFC does own a lot of its content. They do a lot of stuff with fighters and contracts, and we can get all of that. That's like, man, the UFC has been in the driver's seat for a very long time. And this is just another little drop in that basket that shows that is the case.
Yeah, yeah, and if I was fighter seeing that, I'd be like, huh, make you really take into question the amount of that you're getting.
Yeah, definitely. I guess one little thing that popped out to me right away, and again, this is something I would actually want you guys to hit us up. Let me know, like, what do you guys think about this at all? If you have any sort of business acumen, please. Like, I'm looking for more knowledge on this. This is something where it's just like it comes out, and because the business side of it, the UFC has been historically tight-lipped. It's just like trying to actually piece these things together into what they actually mean when you're, trying to be a fan, trying to do media and just videos and stuff like that. It's like 1 second you got to learn about a USADA violation, and all of a sudden you got to be a chemist. Something business wise comes out, all of a sudden you got to be a macroeconomist. So again, but just another little takeaway I had: this idea that the NBA is not global, but the UFC is. I don't know where they got that from.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. The UFC, or sorry, the NBA is very global. Like if you look at their roster, it's like 40% are foreign, I think. So yeah, that's a wild one. That's just not true.
Yeah, I do believe, and I would like to see the breakdown of, and I guess that is something I could actually look up. I don't feel like I've seen this sort of chart, or I don't feel like I've seen this charted out before. But I would like to see, like, by country, which one is more diverse. I'm going to assume that's what the UFC is going off of, because if you're just comparing straight eyeballs, like who's viewing the product more, I would just have to think the NBA is crushing the UFC to the point where that's not even a discussion. But then, I mean, I guess you would sort of have to think of it from the UFC side. For instance, the NBA has its content spread out over a bevy of different channels and things like that. And I'm not the most versed on it, but I do believe their argument is we want the product seen by as many people as possible. That's why you can put YouTube. That's why you can put NBA highlights up on YouTube and not get your video pulled down. The UFC, they're the exact opposite. They will pull your stream, your video, your GIF on Twitter or Facebook. They're very heavy handed about that. So, again, like, I guess I'm going to throw it to you, and I'm not expecting you to be an expert, but the method that the UFC has employed to control a lot of its content, and yes, we know they have broadcasting deals and all that, but their heavy-handed approach as far as copyright, things like that. Do you think that has paid off for them, or should they be more like the NBA?
I think it has paid off for them because they have that big library that they now can use to have their own UFC Fight Pass that they can have, set up a subscription basis that people will pay for to get those fights, along with uh, smaller fight promotions and jiu-jitsu tournaments and boxing and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it has paid off for them, and it's got to be a good thing, when making new deals with TV networks and stuff like that. So, and I was just looking up when we were talking about the UFC, and so I think the scale I'm reading, which I'm seeing it on Reddit. I'm not sure if it's 100% true, but it says in the UFC, 57% are American. So that's that's probably like 20% less than the NBA. So they're probably a little more uh, diverse as far as like worldwide in the sport. But like you said, eyeballs on it. I mean, that's not even a close race at all. So yeah, sorry, I forgot where we were going when I brought the 57%. But yeah, that's crazy stuff. And but I think the NBA is also heading more towards the every year it's getting more and more foreign. So they're like Luka Doncic or whatever. He's the new phenom coming out of wherever he came out of. So that's only growing over there, just like it is in the UFC. They're coming into like different markets like China and Mexico, where we're getting a bunch of talent out of there. So it is cool. It's cool that those sports can both be considered worldwide. To be honest, because you can't say that about football, or not really. I mean, baseball maybe, but definitely not about football. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's just interesting for me. And again, there's a lot I guess you can sort of take from it. I would love to hear what you guys think about it, but it's just interesting because the UFC, they are a lot more buttoned up than I feel like the fans know, or like it just feels like the UFC from their perspective, or at least me seeing something like that, leads me to believe that they kind of like us, the fans, so to speak, championing them as being this like we're in the, we're still in the dirt, we're still in the grind, we're still this and that. When the UFC's sitting back, like, look, we got this thing so figured out and airtight. That's how we're getting deals. Not to mention the Reebok deals almost up, so there's going to be more news floating out there around that soon. So who knows what other checks they're about to start picking up. It just sort of feels like that's what really the dynamic is. And this, again, I'll say it again, this idea that they're just, we're on the up and up, and this struggle story that they tried to sell everyone, it just makes me believe it a little bit less now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I stopped believing all that stuff when I seen I forget the name, but that guy did a, I don't know if you ever seen it. He did a office tour with Dana White, where Dana White showed off his office and the UFC offices and stuff. And I was like, yeah, nobody there is struggling for money. He had like rare dinosaur bones and like ancient warrior swords and stuff, like $1 million worth of like art and stuff all over the walls. So I was like, yeah. But tell me again why you can't pay fighters more than 15.
And Dana tried to have us believe that Holly Holm's manager was a D bag. It's like, nah, and people ate it up. People actually ate that one up. It's like, and again, I'm not trying to veer this completely off, but this idea that managers are supposed to march lock and step with the UFC. No, you not. Everyone does not have to be like Ali Abdelaziz, and it's just one of those things where I'm like, look, if your management team is on the wrong side with the UFC, and the UFC is a little tick, your manager's probably doing something right. Because I just feel it even more where it's like, yo, the UFC has money to spend. They can open up facilities and do this and that. So this idea that it's going to truly kill them to give a 20-20 guy an extra 10K, just as base salary, that I'm not when your roster, you guys can trim it at will. This idea that that's truly going to destroy and hurt the bottom line and mess with you guys structure and what you guys are trying. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it. But I guess you just laid that out perfectly.
Yeah, and with the managers, like, what was it like? If I had a manager agent that was had a super good close relationship, or like just healthy, happy relationship with Dana White and UFC, I'd be pretty worried that I was getting screwed over. Like like you said, like their job is to go in there and fight for you and get the most that you're worth. So yeah, that part is crazy, and especially the low wages that some of these dudes are getting to go in there and put on like crazy fights. Because look, man, we see it in fight cards all the time. Like the 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 second or third fight on the card on the fight past prelims is always like maybe one of the greatest fights of the night. I mean, nobody sees it, but these guys are really putting it out there because they're trying to actually work their way up and stuff. So yeah, seeing that chart that we were discussing, tour of Dana White's office and all that stuff makes it really hard to buy their logic that they can't pay people more because they're investing so much in the sport.
Yeah, it's just, oh man, it's just one of those things that's interesting. The more you sort of start to dig into it, but again, and I'm sure in the future we'll see something else, or we'll have to revisit this conversation. But again, it was just one of those things that I felt like was a little interesting and just something I wanted to touch on this somewhat slow week in MMA. So before we get out of here, I guess, are there any under the radar topics? Anything that you feel like we missed, or anything that you feel like just completely went unnoticed, or didn't get as much buzz as you feel it should have? I guess for me, and I'll let you close it out. For me, and this is not under the radar. This is just sort of like my one random topic. More so in lockstep with fights that are coming up. Greg Hardy, I'm not gonna go on a rant about his sexual assault cases in the past and things like that, or if the UFC should have signed him or not. And obviously, I did a fight preview on that, but I do want to reinforce or double down on one thing I did say, and I just want to say it here. This is the year where if Greg Hardy goes 1-2 or 1-1 or even 2-1, and he still has somewhat the same holes that he does it for another year. The UFC's got to cut bait. UFC's got to cut bait. So that's just me. That's where I'm at on it. Um, but what say you? What's your under the radar topic? And before you do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. It Look, man. There's a saying like if you're gonna be dumb, then you gotta be tough. But like if you're gonna have like a criminal past where people already despise you, you're gonna have to be great, or else there's no reason to have you around. You know what I'm saying? If you're not beating top guys and drawing, bringing in big crowds and stuff, then there's no reason to have the bad press. So they'll just get rid of you. So, like you said, a couple more losses, and he's gonna have to, try out for the XFL. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. I don't know if my topic is really under the radar so much because it's not fight week yet, but I see a lot of talk about like the next fight week is John Jones versus Dominic Reyes, but the co-main event of that is Valentina Shevchenko versus Caitlin Chukagian for the flyweight title. I don't hear barely anybody talking about that, and now that may be because Valentina's last fight was not that exciting against Liz Carmouche, but you got to think like the Jessica Eye head kick, like that stuff can happen anytime, and with someone like Liz or Caitlin Chukagian, who's a stand-up fighter who moves a lot, has a high volume, that could be a really dope 5-round title fight. So I think that's kind of floating under the radar. We'll really see next week, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more next week. But I think they might lose a lot of steam from just people talking about the John Jones Reyes fight. But we'll see.
Yeah, as a whole, I'm looking forward to that card, and that is one of the fights that, to your point, has completely just gone on. Yeah, I do feel it. It does feel like no one is talking about it, but that's going to be interesting because I want to see if Valentina can go in there and get a decisive victory, even if it's not. I just want to see what are the UFC's plans with her long term. She's one of those fighters where I'm like, okay, she has a belt, and at the time, it felt like there was a rush to get her a belt. Now that she has it, it feels like the buzz, so to speak, has died down a little bit, and I'm just sort of interested to see like if she picks up something where it's a TKO in the second round and she had to show a new wrinkle or two. It does the UFC sort of move this forward a little bit? Do they start to get a little bit more creative with her? Um, does Valentina do something crazy to steal buzz? I know that's not really her thing, but does she do something like that? That's sort of where I'm looking at it. But yeah, I do agree with you.
Yeah, and like you said, it just takes one crazy thing, because the buzz was real high after that head kick knockout over Jessica Eye. And then the fight with Liz Carmouche, people were like, "Oh man, that kind of halted things." But like you said, Caitlin Kagan's very good and technical. She doesn't pack a lot of power, so I mean, Valentina might be able to open up a little more. I expect her to probably go to the legs a lot, try to break her down that way. So I'm sure she'll be looking for a finish, and I think that'll help her out a lot. Especially the fight with Carmouche was just like an overseas fight night card on like at whatever time in the morning. This one is an actual co-main event on a big card. Joe Benton's the main event. And that was a similar situation. I think John Jones was the main event when she head kicked Jessica Eye too. I'm not for sure about that, but I think that was a bigger card as well. So big moment. Maybe she'll step up to the moment and come out and impress everybody again. And maybe Caitlin Chukagian can come out and impress everybody and get a really shocking upset. So it's a really interesting fight that, like we've said, is kind of going under the radar right now.
Yep, and again, that's going to be going down next week, UFC 247, and I'm looking forward to that one. Boy, it's like one of those things where I'm just like, anytime John Jones fights, it's one of those things where I know, outside of the craziness, he's a top 5 draw, but not 2 or 1. I just completely butchered that lyrics. I'm just gonna ditch it, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, okay, I get it. So maybe it's a little bit quiet now, but that upset alert is always sort of lurking in the background on those fights. Because whoever eventually pulls it off, there's just nothing but riches on the other side. And the super aggressive rematch. But we'll get to that when someone eventually makes us get there. But all right, that's it for this one. Austin, before we get out of here, let the people know where they can find you. Social media, websites, anything like that.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at MMAPanic, and the website is MMAPanic.com.
All right, you heard it there. Find Austin on Twitter at MMAPanic, website MMAPanic.com. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at Nixon_speaks. And I'll see you guys later on in the week.